We picture gardens as perfect, abundant spaces, neat rows, flawless vegetables, endless sunshine. The image is almost dreamlike, a vision of order and plenty that seems to promise comfort and certainty. But this image is a modern fiction. Historically, gardening was a battle with uncertainty and failure. The reality was far messier, shaped by forces beyond any gardener's control. Scarcity, not abundance, was the norm. The goal was survival, not perfection. For most, the garden was a lifeline, not a luxury. Every decision, from seed choice to plot layout, was shaped by the expectation that something would go wrong. Planning was an act of hope, but also of caution. Late frosts, blight, drought, and pests were predictable, not shocking. These threats were part of the rhythm of the seasons, woven into the fabric of gardening life. The true skill of the gardener was not in preventing problems, but in building a system that could withstand them. Adaptation and flexibility were more valuable than rigid control. Gardens were living, vulnerable systems, designed to absorb shocks and keep producing. They were dynamic, always changing, never truly tamed. Modern minds crave control and guarantees, but nature is unpredictable. The garden was a place where certainty was rare, and humility was essential. Old gardeners accepted chaos, working with it, not against it. They learned to read the signs, to adapt, and to let go of the illusion of mastery. Their gardens were resilient ecosystems, not sterile laboratories. Diversity and messiness were strengths, not flaws. Losing one crop was a setback, not a catastrophe. The system was designed to recover, to keep going even when things went wrong. The story of the historical food garden is one of quiet resilience, not heroic triumph. It's a story of persistence, patience, and learning from failure. Robustness was built through diversity, redundancy, and what might seem like inefficiency today. Every extra row, every mixed planting, was a hedge against disaster. This was a design born from experience, where the memory of hunger outweighed the dream of a perfect harvest. The lessons of the past shaped every choice. The garden's first duty was reliability, not beauty. Productivity mattered more than appearance. It was a larder, not a showcase. The harvest was measured in meals, not in admiration. The expectation was not perfection, but survival. Endurance was the true achievement. Every season brought new challenges, and the garden's design reflected that reality. Adaptation was constant, and change was the only guarantee. In the end, resilience, not flawlessness, was the true measure of success. The unspoken truth of the garden is that its beauty lies in its ability to endure, adapt, and provide, no matter what the world throws at it. To truly understand old gardens, we must first step into the mindset of their caretakers, people whose lives were deeply intertwined with the land they tended. The pre-modern gardener was, above all, a pragmatist, guided not by abstract theory, but by hard-earned, local knowledge passed down through generations and shaped by daily experience. They knew every nuance of their land, where the sun lingered in the late afternoon, where water pooled after a storm, which pests arrived with the changing seasons, and how the wind shaped the garden's edges. This was not book learning, but wisdom built from years of close observation, trial and error, and constant adaptation to the unpredictable rhythms of nature. They didn't command the land, instead they participated in its cycles, working with the seasons rather than against them. Failure was expected: peas lost to mildew, lettuce nibbled by rabbits, chard shredded by hail, and sometimes entire beds ruined by a late frost or sudden drought. These weren't personal failures, just the realities of working with nature's unpredictability, and the gardener accepted them as part of the process. The response was calm adaptation, not frustration, adjusting plans, replanting, and learning from each setback. Planning meant building flexibility and backup into every decision, always preparing for the unexpected. No one variety or crop was ever relied upon. Diversity was insurance, and every bed was a patchwork of possibilities. Early, main crop, and late potatoes were all planted, knowing some would fail, but others would survive, ensuring food security through the season. This was risk management, not mere optimism, a practical approach to uncertainty. The philosophy was always and, climbing beans and bush beans, roots and greens, early and late sowings, all growing side by side. Layered strategies created buffers against uncertainty, so that setbacks in one area could be balanced by success in another. If one plan failed, another was ready to take its place, ensuring the garden's continuity. The goal was never a flawless crop, but a steady, varied yield through the season, enough to feed the household and weather lean times. This mindset made the garden resilient, ensuring something always reached the kitchen table, no matter what the year brought. The pre-modern gardener's wisdom was in expecting trouble and designing around it, always thinking a step ahead. Their gardens were living systems, built to endure whatever the year might bring, and to provide in some measure through every challenge. Historical gardens thrived on polyculture, growing many crops together, not just one. This approach was rooted in centuries of observation and experience, as gardeners learned that diversity brought stability and abundance to their plots. Monocultures invite disaster. A single pest or disease can wipe out everything. Polyculture creates resilience by confusing pests and limiting disease spread. When crops are mixed, pests struggle to find their preferred host, and diseases have a harder time jumping from plant to plant. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, show this perfectly. Each plant supports the others. Corn provides a structure for beans to climb, beans fix nitrogen in the soil, and squash shades the ground to suppress weeds. Pests can't easily move from one to the next, making the system stronger as a whole. European cottage gardens mixed vegetables, herbs, and flowers, using scent and diversity to deter pests and attract beneficial insects. Companion planting, like onions beside carrots or marigolds among tomatoes, was practical pest control. These gardens were vibrant, alive with color and movement, and teeming with helpful pollinators. Diversity meant that if one crop failed, others filled the gap. The garden became a web of small, interconnected systems, not a single vulnerable block. This network of plants supported each other, ensuring that the harvest was rarely a total loss. Redundancy was built in. Beans might fail, but corn and squash would still yield. This approach sacrificed neatness for reliability. The slightly chaotic look of polyculture beds was a sign of their strength, not a flaw. The result was a robust, self-regulating ecosystem. Polyculture wasn't just tradition, it was a deliberate strategy for survival, honed over generations to ensure food security and ecological balance. The strength of the garden lay in its diversity. Every plant played a role in the system's resilience, creating a living tapestry where each species contributed to the health and productivity of the whole. Time was another tool for resilience. Succession sowing spread risk across the season. Instead of planting all at once, gardeners sowed small batches every few weeks. If a late frost or pest wiped out one sowing, others were still to come. This method protected against weather, pests, and gluts. Flea beetles might destroy early brassicas, but later sowings could thrive. Staggered harvests meant a steady supply, not a single overwhelming glut. Waste was reduced, and the kitchen always had something fresh. Temporal diversity was as important as plant diversity. A single bad week couldn't ruin the whole season. The garden's timeline was as resilient as its layout. Succession sowing turned uncertainty into opportunity. Physical layout was another defense. Old gardens used space and separation to contain problems. Crops were grown in small, disconnected beds, not large blocks. Pathways and distance acted as quarantine, slowing disease spread. If blight hit one potato patch, others were protected by space and barriers. Households often had multiple plots, kitchen gardens near the house, staple crops further away. This geographic separation was insurance against disaster. Pathways improved airflow, reducing disease-friendly humidity. Divisions weren't wasted space. They were essential fire breaks. Problems were expected, but contained. The garden was a series of robust, isolated units. Failure in one area never meant total collapse. Historical gardeners saw soil as a living foundation, not a sterile medium. Their focus was on feeding the soil, not just the plants. Compost, manure, and organic matter built a thriving ecosystem underground. Healthy soil acted as a sponge, holding water and nutrients, buffering against drought and flood. Rich soil supported plants through dry spells and suppressed disease naturally. Beneficial microbes outcompeted pathogens, protecting roots. This was a long-term investment in resilience, not a quick fix. Soil health was the garden's first line of defense. A robust soil system could weather almost any storm. The living soil was the heart of the garden's stability. Water was managed for unpredictability, not convenience. Rainwater was harvested in barrels, stored for dry spells. Garden beds were shaped to suit the climate, sunken in dry areas, raised in wet ones. Mulch conserved moisture and suppressed weeds. These simple, passive systems made the garden less dependent on rainfall. Stored water meant seedlings survived droughts. Bed design prevented both flooding and drying out. Mulching kept soil cool and moist, stretching every drop. The garden became self-sufficient, resilient to weather swings. Water management was about security, not abundance. Modern gardens often chase perfection, neat rows, high yields, flawless produce. But this system is fragile, relying on chemicals, irrigation, and uniform crops. There's little redundancy. If one thing fails, the whole system can collapse. Monocultures are vulnerable to pests and disease. One outbreak can wipe out everything. Reliance on external inputs creates dangerous dependencies. Drought, supply shortages, or a new pest can bring disaster. Over time, chemical use degrades soil and kills beneficial insects. The garden becomes a high-maintenance, brittle machine. Natural resilience is lost, replaced by constant need for intervention. Inputs must increase just to maintain yields. The system is locked in a cycle of dependency. Modern gardens have traded resilience for short-term perfection. When trouble comes, they have few defenses left. Historical strategies are more relevant than ever for today's gardeners. Polyculture fits small spaces. Mixed tomatoes, basil, and nasturtium for a mini ecosystem. Interplanting and succession sowing maximize every inch and spread risk. Homemade compost builds soil and saves money. Saving seeds from open-pollinated varieties increases self-sufficiency and resilience. These methods reduce reliance on expensive inputs and adapt to unpredictable seasons. Succession sowing means it's never too late to start. Quick crops can always be sown. A failed batch is just a minor setback, not a disaster. This approach provides a steady harvest and less stress. The pressure for perfection is replaced by flexibility and learning. Ancient wisdom creates modern resilience. Ultimately, what is the garden for? Beauty or survival? The historical gardener valued function over form. The garden was a larder, not a showpiece. Today, a diverse, thriving polyculture can be beautiful in its own right. The real beauty is in the health and complexity of the ecosystem. Embracing imperfection removes pressure and invites learning. Failure is not defeat, but a lesson in resilience. The garden becomes a place for experimentation, not performance. We can choose to design for reality, not fantasy, building gardens that endure, adapt, and feed us, season after season. True success is measured in survival, not perfection.